It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both Presidents Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. Al, I do want to talk to you about this traditional notion of a presidential honeymoon. Most of the time, we're talking about days, not years, but when I look at what's going on with Trump 2.0, I see a kind of a breakdown so far of what I would call the checks and balances that we depend on to make our system work. And I'd like to get both you and Craig to speak to that issue this morning.
Well, this is not a honeymoon. This is a retribution rampage that we've seen from President Trump. Basically, he's gone in with, I don't know, maybe with tanks against the government, just trying to blow it up. I'm almost at a loss for words about what he's trying to do. Craig had a post yesterday where he listed all the headlines of the day. And you know, if somebody came in from Mars, you think from Mars, they just couldn't understand it. I mean, it's just so crazy. He came in with a mission. I guess this was the Steve Bannon plan to flood the zone, as he says. But basically what he's done is he's done two things. One, he's come in completely disrupting everything, going after every institution, going after every perceived enemy that he has in the most me, haphazard way. I mean, reckless way. But the other thing he's done it on TV. Trump is a reality TV person, and he's. I mean, Craig, I don't know how many times you've seen executive orders signed. I've never seen them signed on television. I presented Bill Clinton on day one, as most transition teams do, with a whole book of executive orders, and he went through and he signed. I'm sure he signed most of them, but not on television. So Trump has done this reality TV show. Now, but the most important point now is that we may be coming to reality. Okay, I'd just like to raise three quick issues, and then we ought to just talk about this. First is inflation. He ran to lower prices. Elon Musk and these guys are so out of control. They've got a food crisis with eggs, the price of eggs. And what did they, because of bird flu, what did they do? They fired all the people who study bird flu in the government. Now they're trying to get them back. But inflation is up. He's going to, I gather he's going to try to use his tariff to finance the gazillion-dollar tax cut that he wants to have. That's certainly going to raise prices. So that's the first thing, is the reality. He's going to have to deal with inflation. The second, I hope doesn't come to pass. We have a measles outbreak in Texas, in an unvaccinated, a community that was not vaccinated. This morning, believe it or not, Secretary Kennedy, hard to say, just eliminated the advertising campaign for flu vaccines. What's going to happen if this really gets out of control? And the third thing was his whole deal on Ukraine. He is parroting Vladimir Putin's line on Ukraine. He's taken the Russian side. And it all stems back to the fact of his first impeachment. He's mad at, he doesn't like, for Trump, you either like him or you don't. He either likes you or he doesn't like you. And it all goes back to Zelensky not doing what he wanted to do that led to his first impeachment. Just very briefly on checks and balances, there are two institutions that provide the checks. One are the courts, and a lot of these things are in court, and they're being slowed down, at least, if not blocked. But Trump's bet is he's going to get everything to the Supreme Court, and his pliant Supreme Court will allow him to expand presidential power to really autocratic levels. The second is the Congress. And I hope that what he did yesterday on Ukraine will awaken some of the Republicans in the Senate. I mean, the Congress is controlled by Republicans, uh, and they just aren't operating as a check. When Richard Nixon impounded money, we had a bipartisan group that immediately passed a law to stop it. Okay, nothing. The meekest comments when he calls an elected president of Ukraine a dictator, and implies that the good guy in the battle is the a butcher from Russia, who is probably the most dangerous person in the world. I hope that we'll see some reaction, and that as all of the reality starts to hit, maybe we'll see a reemergence of the checks. But this is a very critical time for our country, and I hate to put it all on the Republicans, but and I might say the Democrats aren't very effective in their opposition either. But Republicans control everything.
The Republicans control everything, Craig. And we've talked about this before, but as of this morning, no one has stepped up to challenge, the president's statements on Ukraine. Where are those checks and balances?
It's very disappointing that there aren't voices raised in opposition when you have people long on the record as supporting Ukraine, might add, including the current Secretary of State. But I want to approach this a little differently. First of all, the question causes me to reflect on the nature of presidents. And when I think of Reagan, Bush, Bill Clinton, each of them, although they didn't necessarily say this, but each of them had this passion for broadening their base, for reaching out to the other side. Reagan famously with Speaker Tip O'Neill, Bush with virtually everybody, Democrats, world leaders. Bill Clinton was superb at it, built a coalition of Republicans to help with NAFTA in his first year when it was threatened. And I marveled at the time that this was a president who was, reaching out to those of us who could help on issues where there was agreement. There is no semblance of that with Donald Trump. Donald Trump basically has three audiences he plays to, and the polling numbers are beginning to speak for themselves. I pay less attention to the actual number than I do to the trend, but what audience are those people who voted against him, who he doesn't like and could care less about? He just writes them off. Well, that's half the voters. I mean, it's and a remarkable, probably larger than that percentage of the country. And then he has those who voted for him because they didn't like the other choice of the incumbent, President Biden. He doesn't do much to win them over, and they're beginning to fall away. In the polling, it shows that there's a higher and higher objection to the way he's conducting himself as president. There's now beginning to be, as the impacts of some of these actions are taking hold, reactions against it. The third audience are those who are absolutely solid, he thinks, for him. That's the audience he plays to all the time. That's the audience he sends out Truth Social messages to. One last night, unbelievably, says he's doing away with the tolling in New York City. He signs it, "Long live the King." I mean, these posts that he puts out, there's no filter. This is a directly from his brain to the post he puts out, and it shows you just how he has detached himself from what the world most presidents live in. I think that there are checks and balances. If you think of it as kind of like a political gravity of sorts, he can only take on so much of weight and burden before it begins to pull him down. And it's beginning to pull him down because the approval rating that was above 50% that he pounded his chest about is now below 50%. 48% in the poll this morning say that they disapprove of his activities. And so he's beginning to lose. He's lost the people who voted against him. I mean, I don't think they're terribly taken by what he's doing. The people who were in the middle, he's losing them. And I think he's going to begin to lose some of those loyal supporters who voted for him because he was going to lower prices, lower inflation, give them a better life. And he's now, one of those headlines Al referred to, he's now said, yeah, no, inflation's going up. I have nothing to do with that. Well, wait a minute. That, you were going to lower that on day one. So as ultimately, I think I said in an earlier discussion, there are the constituencies, the courts, and the Congress. The constituencies are beginning to lose faith. I think that's the direction the polling is going. As they lose faith, you've got now members of Congress, including some Republicans, who are very concerned about the impact of the cuts because they've got to defend them when they go back home. Yeah, I saw the other day, 8% cut in the defense budget. Is there money to be saved there? Probably, but you know what? 8% is a very big number, and that means defense contracts and jobs, and these things have an impact. And so the constituencies are falling away. The Congress is going to get antsy as they get closer to election year next year. And then, as Al said, the courts, if he is going to play fast and loose with the Supreme Court, I think he's going to lose even more support. And it would really surprise me to see the Supreme Court just kind of give him a pass on a lot of these things because they're so egregious. So I do believe still that there are checks and balances there. I do believe that while disappointing, members of Congress who face their own reelection will begin to see the consequences on their own constituents and raise their concerns.
Al, I want to take on a little bit of what Craig was saying. I don't think that Donald Trump cares about what his popularity polls are showing. He cannot run it again unless there is a constitutional amendment. I mean, it just seems like this just adds fuel to his approach that he can say anything at any time.
Excuse me, I agree with that. Look, I agree. I mean, what Craig says is right. As things sink in, his numbers are starting to go down, and people don't approve of a lot of the things he's doing. You go through a list. Elon Musk, his hero of the day, has gotten approval ratings that are decidedly negative. But the problem is that he can do a lot of damage between now and the next election. And he just moves ahead. I mean, he did a lot of damage to our country yesterday. In an ordinary world of the United States, if we were in ordinary times, there's a chance that he would be impeached by the Congress almost for treason. I mean, he sided with our enemies. It's been the policy of the United States for since World War II, and he just completely threw it out.
Yeah.
So the point is, he can do a lot of damage. We have all the air disasters. Craig knows about this more than anybody. He's an expert in the field. But, what does he do? He, the Meat Act cuts out all the people from the FAA because he doesn't like them or something. He cuts out all the people who are responsible for, nuclear safety. Because, I mean, there is no rhyme or reason to anything he does except for two things. One, it expands his power, and he's the boss, and he keeps him on television all the time. And but most importantly, gets at his enemies. I mean, we're gonna confirm today Kash Patel as head of the FBI. Lord knows. I mean, these guys who have gone up like RFK. I mean, he wasn't going to be anti-vaccine. First thing he does is, as I said, it cuts out the advertising campaign for flu vaccine. I mean, these are things that are dangerous to the country. And the other thing that I didn't mention before that I think has a lot to do with this is he's trying to make money. Maybe he's got a deal in Russia. I mean, he's extorting every CEO, calls them down, major CEO. He has tried to intimidate all the press, and one of the tragedies about the decline of the both newspapers and really television media is that they're now owned by corporations whose main business, or a lot of them is not the press, not media, and so they're willing to make deals that undermine freedom of the press, as ABC did. CBS about ready to do it, and Trump takes complete advantage of that. He does not believe in the legal system. He has had a lifetime of gaming it, and he gamed it. He's gamed it more. The Supreme Court. I mean, I really, sort of was couldn't decide whether I should post what I did about Mitch McConnell, but I just finally said, screw it, I'm going to do it, because Mitch McConnell, by maneuvering the court, has really done damage to this country. He's done, and also by not voting to impeach Trump and then going to the floor and saying he was guilty. But the court last year gave him basically immunity to do whatever he wants in office. I mean, I suppose that the good thing in our system, and then I'll shut up, is that impeachment is a political process. And so if enough Republicans really get their cojones and decide to stand up to him, they could do they could discipline him. But basically, with the immunity decision that came out of the court, he can change policy on Russia. He can side with our enemies, but he's doing it as an official duty.
Greg, you have the last word this week.
Well, I was thinking as this conversation has gone on of a visit that I had with one of my friends who says, none of you guys offer much support for Donald Trump, and that goes to people who are there to support him. But the challenge is that one could argue, many of them argue, and that look, Trump is asking the tough questions. We should be able to find savings in the government. Well, absolutely we should. But really, you want to cut the FAA personnel at this point in the time? Are there cost overruns in the Defense Department? Absolutely. Should you cut it by 8%? Should you get rid of inspectors general, who are the very people in these departments who have, in some cases, decades of experience at getting at complex, complicated contracts and budgeting and finding savings? The FBI finds and investigates and gets convictions on criminals who are defrauding the government and welfare, but we cut the FBI. So, yes, there's a principle that we should be spending our money effectively. I'm all for that, but the way in which they're going about it makes no sense. Others will say, well, these tough questions have to be asked of NATO. NATO has to do more. Okay, there's something to that. But to go in the first 30 days to send your Secretary of Defense, your Secretary of State, and your Vice President into Europe and insult our allies and side with, as Al says, the talking points that Putin offers on what he did in Ukraine, it just makes no sense. I mean, Donald Trump was inaugurated 30 days ago. This thing we've been living through is only 30 days.
Yeah.
And that's why I say I just don't think that he can sustain the kind of burdens he's taking on. And I think it's going to be increasingly difficult to find people who can support him. He's going to present a budget later this month, I think, or not later, next month in March, that'll have $1 trillion deficit. So he has Elon Musk running around trying to find $1 billion here, $1 billion there, but the deficit is going to grow. So none of this just kind of fits, and I think that's ultimately where members of Congress are going to become increasingly concerned. And I like Al, hope that they will assert themselves. Those in leadership have a responsibility to do so, and also to hold accountable these people they're confirming who lack experience and in some cases even ethical conduct to hold the position. But at least they are obligated to hold them accountable with respect to their actions. And if a cabinet secretary says, "Well, now I'm if I get the job, I'm for vaccines, and then cancels programs to promote, safe and effective vaccines, somebody ought to go investigate that. So I think we're in for, a good deal of turmoil. I think it is wearing on the American public. And I think that's one of the reasons these numbers are going down, and people are going to want a different approach to the government. And if it's already wearing on them after 30 days, imagine going through this whole year. And at that point, people are going to have to decide whether they want to send back the same individuals to Congress or not. And that usually gets the attention of members of the Congress.
Craig Fuller, Al Fromm, thank you so much indeed. We will see you next week.